The heart attack gun. The year was 1975, and a huge Watergate scandal had just forced the CIA to reveal secrets that it had kept hidden for decades. Mind you, these are the secrets that no one should have known. 7 burglars, believed to have been sent for President Nixon's re-election campaign, had broken into the Watergate Hotel in Washington, D.C., hoping to steal some documents and wiretap phones at the Democratic National Committee headquarters. It sounds straight out of a Hollywood movie, and we guess it is. 5 of the 7 burglars had past ties to the CIA, so they knew what they were doing. President Nixon then made the rookie mistake of attempting to use the CIA to obstruct the FBI's investigation, initiating a huge cover-up. The scandal dominated headlines for 2 years, leading to a massive collapse in public trust towards the U.S. government. The American public demanded transparency from all the intelligence agencies, which then forced the government to reveal many of the CIA's dirty and illegal secrets. This included things like mind control experiments, infiltration of civil rights groups, and even spying on the general public. It also included information about how they spread propaganda and about endless assassination plots on foreign leaders. In other words, these were the stuff that they said were just conspiracies, and they were the ones who revealed it. But all those were nothing compared to what came next, which was a handgun. Now, the scope of this handgun clearly indicated that it was mainly used for trolling, but it was quite deadly. You see, the gun didn't fire regular bullets. In fact, it fired a frozen projectile that was made of both water and a selfish toxin. If you don't know about the selfish toxin, it is one of the deadliest poisons on the planet. In other words, a lethal dose is about the size of a small seed and can kill anyone in a couple of minutes. If that wasn't scary enough, the poison was also completely untraceable and mimicked a natural heart attack, which forces us to think about how many people who died of a heart attack actually died of the heart attack gun. The mist gun. Perhaps one of the most deadly and terrifying weapons ever used by spies could be the mist gun. Don't go on that innocent name, because that's definitely not what it is. This cyanide mist gun was mainly used by the KGB during the 1950s. Here's how it worked. Spies would wrap the mist guns with newspaper, allowing them to easily blend in as just another person reading the news on the street. Then they would casually walk up towards their target, and as they passed them, they would raise the newspaper to the person's face and squeeze the trigger. There, a fine mist would spray out of the hand, and the person, even though he or she would let out a yell, would be on the floor struggling to breathe. Within seconds, they would be turned dead. 2 Ukrainian men were taken out in this exact way by the KGB. Since this was the 1950s, before advanced forensics, the doctors simply eyeballed them and deemed that they died from heart attacks. It would have remained that way if the assassin had not later confessed to the killings. What makes this weapon particularly disturbing is how subtle it is. There are no gunshots, no sound, and anyone could easily be killed in any way as long as they're proud. In the end, the victim would just collapse on the streets from what appears to be natural causes of heart attacks. The umbrella. You thought the cyanide gun was deadly? Wait till you hear what kind of weapon the umbrella is, and subscribe if you're enjoying it so far. To understand the seriousness of umbrella, let us place you in a short story so you can see in real time how spy missions actually went down in history. A person would currently be waiting at a bus stop, waiting to be picked up to head to work, when suddenly they would feel a slight sting on the back of their thigh. They would quickly turn and see a man behind them picking up an umbrella. The stranger looks up and then quickly apologizes. A few moments later, a car pulls up and the stranger gets inside and leaves. A few hours pass and the victim is now at work. They begin to develop a fever. Naturally, being a guy, they decided that the best course of action would be to do nothing and just shrug it off, but in this particular case, it didn't work, and they ended up in a hospital. As the fever worsened, they spent the next 4 days struggling to even breathe, sadly, without them knowing this would be the last few days of their lives. What exactly happened here? The stranger at the bus stop didn't accidentally drop his umbrella, but what really happened was the man shot a 1.5 m ricin pellet in the thigh and then played it off like it was some kind of accident. The pellet left a wound in the thigh that was smaller than a grain of sand, which makes it nearly impossible for even doctors to discover. The exact story isn't made up, because this is the story of Georgy Markov, and it happened in London in 1978. Markov was a famous Bulgarian writer who defected to Bulgaria, which means that he escaped the country. Once he was in Western Europe, he began heavily criticizing Bulgaria's communist regime on both the news and radio stations. This hurt the leader's feelings, and of course, knowing how the communist leaders would do, the only reason we ever knew of this umbrella's existence was thanks to Markov's experience. He explained to the authorities what had happened to him at the bus stop, which led them to search his leg for the wound, which they eventually discovered was actually a spy weapon being used on them. Shockingly, the wound just looked like a small pimple, which is why no one could even think of discovering it. I'm doing a $100 Amazon gift card giveaway to celebrate when this channel reaches 1,000 subscribers. No action is required to enter. I'll randomly pick a winner once we hit the milestone. If you want to follow the journey or see the winner announcement, feel free to subscribe. The pen. Next up is the pen, but it's not the one you use to actually write things. It was 2011 when the intelligence officers in South Korea discovered something fascinating that had them punching the air like they found out something that wasn't supposed to exist. And sure enough, they were right to think so. This pen came from a North Korean spy who was sent to kill a defector who ran from the north. If we regular folks saw this pen, we wouldn't even think much of it. We would even click it a couple of times, thinking that it was harmless. However, once the soldiers discovered that it didn't have a nib, that's where they got suspicious. This pen wasn't supposed to work as a pen from the start. If we were to twist the back of the pen clockwise 3 to 4 times, then click the button back, a poison-coated needle would shoot up the pin. This needle was accurate up to 10 meters or over 30 feet, and as we can imagine, no shortage of poison could have coated that needle. The beauty of this weapon from an espionage perspective is how normal it looks. As soon as the victim was hit by it, they would die instantly. Chemical poisons. The worst way, by far, to take out the enemy spy has to be through the use of chemical poisons. Not because it is extremely painful to die from them, but because of how efficient and humiliating they are when spies use them. After all, is there anything worse than being killed by a doorknob? There have been many high-profile cases of spies using chemical poisoning to take out or attempt to take out targets. Now we are thinking that chemical poisoning might sound a lot like cheating, and it is. This exploit was even patched in the 1997 World Update, when most countries signed the Chemical Weapons Convention. But a few countries, like North Korea, chose not to sign it because they were way too efficient for them to start their regime of taking over the world. Then there is this recent situation with Russia, which did sign the No Chemical Weapons Treaty. In 2018, an ex-Russian spy was taken out with a Novichok Narv agent in the UK by 2 Russian intelligence officers. The world turned to Russia and said, "What the hell?" In other words, they didn't agree to ignore it, but according to Russia, it was their ex-officer who did it. Not exactly them, which is a major sigh of relief for absolutely nobody. Concealment weapons. When you think of spies secretly taking out targets, disguised weapons are probably the first thing you can imagine. Concealed weapons were guns that were designed to look like everyday items. In other words, they wouldn't raise any suspicion. Throughout history, there were many concealed guns that were used by spies, but we'll cover the ones that are most common that were known to be used the most. Let's start with the cigarette pack gun, which is a concealed weapon that was invented by the KGB. It looks exactly like a small pack of cigarettes, but it could fire a single shot when triggered. Then there was the cane gun, which was a multi-shot weapon disguised as a cane. It was used by the British CIA and KGB during World War II and the Cold War. The worst of them all was the lipstick gun, which was also known as the kiss of death. It was used by female KGB agents during the Cold War. It was a single-shot 4.5 mm pistol disguised as a tube of lipstick. These are the concealment weapons that were so effective not because of their disguise, but because of their psychological advantage. Pencil bomb. Just when we thought the list couldn't get crazier, have you ever even heard of the pencil bombs? Well, yes, they did exist and were used by the German spies during World War I. These were metal cylinders that were the size of a cigar that had wax caps on both ends. Inside the container, there were 2 different acids that were divided by a copper divider. The thicker the copper divider was, the longer it would take for the acid to dissolve it, but once the 2 acids mixed, they would rapidly heat up and catch fire. German spies placed these inside the American warships while they were docked. Days later, once the ship was at sea, the devices would catch fire, setting the ship's supplies ablaze, and sometimes the entire warship. During WW, over 36 U.S. ships had this time-delayed bomb fire placed on them, and then over $10 million worth of war supplies were destroyed. The brilliance of these pencil bombs was how simple and reliable they were. There were no electronics used that could have exposed them, and no malfunction, no batteries to die, just basic chemistry doing its deadly work and killing people in a very unique fashion. These were history's most terrifying spy weapons. Which one surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments down below, and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed the video.